So, hello everybody. I think we will start the session. So this session is dedicated to policy making and how to reach scientists, how to reach policy makers, which language we should use, what activities can we do, and we should promote within the Europlanet ERI or society, depending on the future. So very sadly, Eleni, who has proposed this workshop, cannot join us today. So she asked me to be the mediator of this session. I must say that I'm quite new in this business of policy making and contacting policymakers, but I'm learning. We will have an introductory, some introductory words from Eleni. She recorded some things. Then we will have another recorded talk by Mr. Rodrigo Da Costa, who is the director of the EUSPA, and he will present what he is doing and what he can offer us tips and things to do as scientists. And here live, we are happy to have Noel Baker, who will, I hope, and be able to answer the many questions that we will have after those discussions. Noel will also describe what she is doing. I will let her introduce herself later, maybe when you will have the words. So I think we'll start with the introductory words from Eleni, and we'll see.
Hello, I'm very glad to be with you. So I'm Eleni Chatzichristou. I'm a policy analyst at European Research Council Executive Agency, and I'm also chairing the committee, policy committee of the Europlanet Society. So this is a very interesting subject, raising space research feasibility for policymakers. It is clear that space exploration has long been a subject of fascination for the public and thus for policymakers as well. But as the space technology advances and space exploration becomes increasingly important for scientific, but also for economic and even national security reasons, it is needed to have an effective space policy. And in order to create such a comprehensive and effective space policy, it is essential that policymakers have access to the latest scientific research and the insights from the experts in the field. So what I do hope will be discussed and highlighted in this workshop is the importance of scientists informing policymakers in order to create effective space research policies. Often scientists do not agree on being involved in informing policymakers. I think one of the primary reasons why scientists should inform policymakers is indeed that space exploration has significant scientific value. And it is important to show that it has led to numerous scientific discoveries, ranging from the study of the solar system, for instance, but also to the development of new technologies and materials. So scientists can provide these insights and their expertise to policymakers, helping them to understand the scientific importance of space exploration and the potential benefits that can be gained from it. Space exploration has important economic, national security implications. Space technology has numerous applications in fields such as communications, transportation, defense. So a comprehensive space policy can help to promote economic growth and innovation, enhance national security, and at the same time significantly support pure scientific research. Another reason that scientists should inform policymakers is that space technology, space exploration is technologically challenging endeavor. So it requires significant resources, funding, skilled personnel, advanced technology. So scientists can help policymakers understand the technical challenges involved in space exploration and the resources that are needed to overcome these challenges. So by providing valuable insights and expertise, scientists can help to ensure that space policy is effective, innovative, sustainable, and this in turn can help to promote scientific research and discovery. Now, another aspect that is going to be discussed in this workshop is what kind of skills scientists need in order to effectively communicate with policymakers. I would say that scientists need to have a good understanding of the policy making process, how policy decisions are made, knowledge of the relevant laws, regulations, understanding of the roles and responsibilities of the different agencies that play this role. Also, they need to have political awareness, a good understanding of the political landscape, the political context in which policy decisions are made, understanding the political priorities of different stakeholders. Now, there is also the need to be able to translate complex scientific concepts into language that can easily be understood by policymakers. I will say a bit about this in a moment because this is another aspect that is going to be discussed in this workshop. Also, flexibility and adaptability is important for scientists. What does this mean? Policy making is a dynamic, rapidly changing process. So scientists should be able to adjust their messages and strategies as the policy landscape is shifting. So overall, scientists who are able to combine scientific expertise with effective communication skills, a deep understanding of the policy-making process, are most likely to be successful in communicating with policymakers. Now, a final word about the translation between the languages used by policy and science. This can be very challenging because the two domains have different goals, different terminology, and different communication styles. So I would say that the first point is try to understand the objectives, the different objectives. Policies aim to guide decision making, address societal issues, for instance, while science focuses on acquiring knowledge and on understanding phenomena. So one needs to familiarize oneself with the one and the other language, and then identify areas of overlap, identify common grounds, look for common themes shared by policy and scientific research, simplify then the complex concepts, avoid jargon, avoid technical terms, use analogies or real-world examples to illustrate the complex scientific ideas, provide scientific evidence, studies, expert opinions, be particularly persistent in trying to collaborate to foster relationships between the scientific community and the policy makers community, for instance through workshops, conferences, joint projects, and finally also communicate the uncertainties. So science often deals with uncertainties. Policymakers need to understand the limitations, the caveats of scientific research. So one needs to clearly communicate also the level of confidence, the potential risks associated with scientific findings. So policymakers can make informed decisions based on the available evidence. Translation between policy and science requires patience, empathy, effective communication skills. It may take time to bridge the gap, but it is definitely possible. And with this, I would just let you start this workshop, and wish we are very successful and we draw some very interesting conclusions at the end. Thank you.
So before we start talking and before we give the word to Noel, there is, so as I said, another presentation. So let's hear.
First of all, thank you very much for having me at this Europlanet meeting today. It's a pity I cannot be with you, but I wanted to answer your questions by video. Certainly, science and policy making have a very strong relation, but let me start by telling you that we are the European Union Agency for the Space Program, where we take a key role in the provision of space-based services, with a strong focus, of course, on the navigation services of the EU Space Program and a number of other activities. And when providing space services, certainly we connect with the science community. We are providing capability data that indeed are state-of-the-art. They are unique in Europe, and they are then used for many policies across the European Union. Look, for example, at policies such as the Green Deal, one of the big challenges and one of the big objectives, priorities that the Commission has set for this mandate. Space provides key data, provides key services for the implementation of the Green Deal. Things like, for example, smart cities, more efficient transport, a better agriculture, all those benefit from space. And in addition to that, we are also working tightly with the EU research program, Horizon Europe, where we are responsible for implementing the Horizon downstream activities. And here we are working with industry, large companies, small companies, but we are working as well with institutions, we are working as well with academia to develop the applications for the future. So as you can see, there are many relationships between space data, space services, policy making, and the scientific world. The feedback between the policy-making community and the scientific community is fundamental. And we can look at it from very different aspects. Let me tell you two of them that we have been looking at. First, economic market studies, economic assessment of what are the benefits and where does space actually contribute to our society. We have been publishing since a while what we call a market report. The last edition is a little bit less than 2 years old. And in this market report, we look at the benefits of space in very different sectors, actually in 17 in total. And those sectors are quite diverse. We are looking at rail, road, aircraft transportation. We are also looking at agriculture, forestry, energy management, etc., etc. And in order to have a look at that, and therefore that will help, of course, setting the policies of the future, it is extremely important to have a dialogue between the experts and the scientists in each of these communities, and then, of course, what are the policy making and what are the market opportunities. A second thing I would focus on is a study that we have done very recently. We have actually just last week we have published, is a study that we are doing together with UNOSA. And in this study, we are looking at how space can bring benefits to the 8 billion people world, the 8 billion people Earth. Also there, we are looking at many areas where space is supporting our everyday life. There are many skills that are necessary to well engage with policymakers, but if I have to highlight one, let me highlight the one of effective communication. And of course, all of us, also we working on the technologies of the space program, we get very much focused on our concrete area of activity, our concrete speciality. But it is extremely important to be able of translating that into words that make sense to those people that are making the policies. And these are not only policy officers in this or that administration, this is also the political level. So certainly the scientific community needs and has, of course, excellent communication skills to pass the message and translate into easy terms, into understandable terms, what are the needs, what are the orientations to the policymaking community. One of the key roles in this translation of languages between different groups or different communities, and by the way, it's one that is often forgotten, is that of the facilitator. The facilitator plays really a key role in translating things that at first may seem very complex, but then can translate in terms that are understandable by policymakers. This is one of the things that we are very proud to do in our agency, translating between space technology, space data, space services, which at first may seem complex and not easy to grasp, into then concrete economic policies, concrete economic standards and directions that can be used in different sectors of our daily life. So certainly the role of facilitator is a fundamental one. At EUSPA, we are very proud to be a facilitator and to be at the center of these worlds, bringing together the scientific and technological community, also with the policymakers, and then creating real benefits for our citizens.
Eleni addressed a lot of very pertinent questions that we should try to answer during these sessions. And I will give the word to Noel.
Thank you, Anne-Carine. I'm happy I can be here today, so we have at least one member of the panel in person and I can answer your questions. My name is Noel Baker. I'm a climate scientist by training. I'm currently working as a project manager of several Earth observation missions at the Royal Belgian Institute for Space Aeronomy in Brussels. And I'm also a member of the EGU's Science for Policy Working Group, and I manage many different science policy, outreach, and communication activities in Brussels. So I have a bit of experience in the science policy sphere, and I'm going to share with you some of my personal story, but also some practical information for you if you are interested in the science policy sphere or if you just want to understand it, and also give you some resources that you can use to help assist you if it's something that you would like to get into. So I started my scientific career as a postdoc at NASA, and while I was there, I was very fortunate to take part in an activity. It was a forum organized by the White House between scientists at NASA and local universities and local policy and resource managers in the Hampton Roads area, because there we have a very difficult issue that is extremely relevant for everyone living there, is that the sea level is rising and the ground is sinking at the same time. So it's an especially bad situation there. So they brought us all together and they asked us many questions at this forum. And I really enjoyed the feeling of serving as a scientific expert on a panel, on a team of people who had very pressing, immediate societal needs, business owners who were trying to figure out if they should invest in the next 5 or 10 years to combat sea level rise, policymakers who needed to know what's the time frame for different policies to be able to mitigate some of these issues they were going to face. And serving as a scientific advisor, I felt respected. I felt like my information would be directly useful and would have a strong societal impact right away. And that was incredibly satisfying and very, very interesting for me. So much so that I quit my job at NASA and moved to Europe and decided to do science policy at an international level. So I found a program at the European Commission and worked there for a while several years ago. And I absolutely loved it, so I can speak a little bit about that experience. But I also now, as a member of EGU's Science for Policy Working Group, do different activities at the European level. And I'm happy to speak about any of those experiences. But I would like to give you a bit more general information now, because I'm sure many of you here are pure scientists. Many of you have never done anything in the science policy sphere. You might even be questioning, why should I care? Why should I be interested? And in fact, Eleni touched on this, but it's a question in the community. I always tell people when I tell my personal story that my PhD advisor warned me when getting into climate science, do not get political. He said very clearly, very specifically, stay out of the politics, stay unbiased, stay a pure scientist so that people will never question your expertise and whether or not you have become biased and your science has been compromised. I absolutely did not follow his advice, but I completely understand why he gave it. And for many scientists, it's okay. Continue to be a scientist. You don't have to get involved in policy. But for those of you who, like me, are interested in having a more direct societal impact, answering scientific needs, or simply communicating your science to people who might be directly interested, I think it's a fantastic way to do so, and it's incredibly rewarding, I've found. And so I'd like to speak to you a little bit about that. Now, to talk about how you could get involved in science policy, I like to talk about a spectrum that scientists might be able to engage in. So it's not just a science policy spectrum, it's also a science communication spectrum. And on one end, you have the pure scientists who, like I said, never would set foot in the policy sphere, stay unbiased and pure, and nobody would question their intentions. Then on the far end, you have someone like me who rejected the pure scientific career and actually went to work for a policymaking organization. Then in between, you have a wide, very varied set of different ways that people can get involved as scientists in the science communication and policy sphere. For example, let's say as a pure scientist, you want to get involved just a little bit. What can you do right now? There are already ways that you can start developing those competences because let's face it, we were never trained on how to give public speeches. We were never trained on how to speak to the public or policymakers, and those tools are absolutely necessary for any kind of science policy or science communication activities that you would take on. So developing those competences and skills are an important first step. I would argue that science outreach and communication is the most important first step for doing science policy and learning how to do that in an effective way. And both Rodrigo and Eleni touched on that there are language and skills that you'll need to develop and understand how to use in order to properly speak to policymakers and to the public. And that's incredibly important because as scientists, I mean, as a climate scientist, I talk about climate bias. And to the public or to a policymaker, bias is a very bad thing. I spoke about it earlier as a political bias, for example, but in climate science, it's obviously just a deviation from a median or norm. That's not something that the average person is going to understand out of context. We have to be very careful about this kind of language. So just understanding that language and being able to explain it in a simple way that's not dumbing down your science is an excellent first step. Now, if you'd like to get involved a bit more than just being able to speak about your science and do outreach, there are lots of activities that you can take part in, different forums where you can speak to the public and you can target through your field of research. So in planetary sciences, for example, there are forums where you can be a speaker that represents the scientific community and the public can come and listen to you speak. Again, I consider this on the science policy spectrum, even if you're not directly engaging in policy. Now, if you would like to get a little bit closer to the policy side, this is where it comes in that you'll need to do a bit of research and background, where you understand current laws that are relevant or being voted on at your national level, local level, or the EU level, and you understand different ways that you can get active and involved. For example, something as simple as writing a letter to a newspaper is an excellent way to influence local policy. You can represent yourself or you can make it anonymous, but if you represent yourself, you say, this is my opinion as a scientist, and I think that this upcoming proposition is a very good thing for science policy, and you can give reasons, you can give your background as an expert. Those kind of editorials and notes from scientists are very, very influential in local policy. So that's something you can already do today to make a very small change in the science policy sphere. Now, at a national and international level, it becomes a bit more difficult, but that's why we have fantastic networks that you can join if you have no idea where to start. Europlanet is creating a foundation for being able to be part of a network where you have contacts and people who do these kind of activities, like myself, on a daily basis, who are happy to connect you to the right people if you're interested. So there are support structures that exist that can help you get more directly involved. Now, I wouldn't recommend that all of you quit your jobs tomorrow and go work for the European agencies. I don't think that would be the best thing that you can do, but for anyone who's inspired to do, I will say it is a fantastic experience if you know what you're doing, if you know where to direct your energy, because policymakers want to hear from us. And this is something that might be hard to believe coming from a pure science background, but policymakers really do want to hear from us because we give them information that they can use as justification for the laws that they're trying to make decisions on. Your opinion, your expertise is highly valued and highly valuable to these people. And if this is something that you feel inspired to do, by all means do it. I strongly recommend it. I think you can make incredible impacts directly, immediately, if you're interested in engaging. And I also know that it is difficult for a scientist in our careers. You're not rewarded for these kind of activities. And that's another major issue, is that you don't receive a higher HI index by engaging in science outreach or policy. You don't get more funding for your institution. You don't get proposals accepted if you have experience in science policy and outreach. I understand there's not a good way set up right now to reward yourselves for doing these kind of activities. It's purely volunteer in a lot of cases, but I'm hoping that as the general mood and momentum of the scientific community is changing going forward, I do see momentum, and I do see these kind of activities being better rewarded and highly viewed upon and praised in the future. So I do hope that the scientific community will change its mind and will see the value in these activities going forward. So I have a lot that I can talk about, but I would much rather engage with you and hear what experiences that you all have, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about any particular things that you might be interested in doing or might want to know about. So I'll hand it back over to Anne-Carine.
So I totally agree. The aim of this session is really to have an interaction, to ask as many questions as possible. We will try to answer. So, Luca.
So I have a curiosity. Scientists have to make an effort to go towards policy. That's absolutely clear and true. I wonder whether the politicians do the same effort? Do they set up training, capacity building workshops to understand science?
Surprise it. It's on, but it doesn't sound. Is it on? Yeah? Okay. I just have to speak loud. I'm not good at that. It is surprising to hear this, but they do actually. The European Commission's Joint Research JRC group has a competence framework that they've been working on. A good friend of mine actually helped lead that, Lena Top. She's fabulous in the science policy sphere. They have community workshops open to the public in which you can go build these kind of competences and skills. And there are also extremely good networks already set up to assist people who are interested. If you engage with the people who are doing this, there are so many policy and skill capacity building resources available to anybody, free to use online right now. I'm happy to provide links. But to go back to the first part of your question, actually, I don't know if this is what you were actually asking, but I'll answer it anyway. Policymakers are making an effort to hear from scientists, but it's not like they're not journalists. They're not going to look up someone's background and try to find a particular expert to get their opinion about something. Instead, what they do is they have a trusted network that they'll go to. For example, an intergroup. Another good friend of mine is leading an intergroup that works often with the parliament, with the MEPs, and they have established this trusted platform between them. And the intergroup is the mechanism that brings them the expertise that they need and serves as that interface. So if you get in contact with my colleague, Ilias Grampas is his name, he's fabulous. If you get in contact with him, you're now part of his network. And if any MEP has a question related to your expertise, he can then connect you. So again, it's a lot of networking, but they really do reach out. Politicians need these kind of these networks to be able to get the information that they're seeking, and quite quickly too. When they need something done, it's can you find me an expert who can give me a report by Thursday? And it's, you know, Wednesday morning.
Thank you. Over here, Petr Brož, Czech Academy of Sciences. I have a remark about that. I'm quite active on the social networks as well, and I have a huge Twitter account in Czechia. And what is interesting, I'm followed by high-profile politicians. And this is a really nice way how to indirectly affect their decision-making, because the content I'm producing about global change, space exploration, and so on, they are seeing in their feeds every day. And then they have much better idea what we as a scientists are doing. It's a time-consuming process. There are no direct outcomes from it because I'm not able to see, you know, who is reading that. But I know because they are interacting with my content that they are really influenced by the content I'm producing. So this is the way what you can do, what you can be doing on everyday basis as a scientist, just sharing the information you have on your social networks. And you will sooner or later find the people who would be following that, even the politicians.
Thank you. I'm so glad you said that. Social media is such an important tool these days for the individual. And there, for example, on Twitter, there's different networks that have been set up, lists of climate scientists, and I've been placed on those lists, and then politicians will follow those lists specifically for that kind of information. And I'm certain that those kind of lists exist for planetary sciences as well. But like you said, you need to put in the work. You need to be able to post, not daily, but you know, have a consistent level of communication that people will follow you. But then you do have a direct link to the policymakers themselves, or at least their policy teams. So thank you for that.
And I would just say, as you said before, the problem is that nobody's paying you for that.
Yes. Was it Jean-David?
Yes, hello. I had a question, like, when you talk to politicians, what type of arguments do you use? I mean, of course, for climate science, the impact for the society are clear and kind of, I won't say obvious, but so the things that with planetary science, it's sometimes much harder to tell them, okay, these are the advantages, these are the consequences on society directly, because a lot of what we do is fundamental research. Like, for example, who cares if we find out how exactly planets form? They are there. So what type of arguments would you think would be impactful to talk to politicians to, I don't know, for example, raise the budget of space science in Europe? That would be great.
That would be great. So two things. One, actually, I don't know if anyone attended EGU this year in Vienna, but I organized a space policy session at EGU that was fantastic. We had representatives from all over Europe who were talking about policy in space science and how we can increase visibility and impact. So that was a fantastic session that's now available online. I think it's just been posted on YouTube. Yeah, so you can look that up. I highly, highly recommend it. But the second part is when talking to politicians, that's a good question. It's a very broad question, though. It strongly depends on the situation you're in and why you're talking to them. So in most cases, when you are speaking directly with a politician, it is, for example, in, I would say, two main spheres of types of interactions that you'll have. One is an informal discussion. That's when you should have your elevator pitch, as we call it, when you have a few lines already prepared in your mind. This is what I think is the most important thing for planetary policy. This is what I hope that you will do as a politician. Already have that prepared in your head. It's even better if you know something about the current status of policy so that you can have a direct comment on a particular policy that's being voted on, or a general policy. I mean, asking to raise funding is very nice, but a very broad statement. It would be much better if you have very specific ideas for how you can influence policy, or how this particular policymaker can. So that's one way in which you might talk to a policymaker, but the more direct and more impactful specific one is when you are speaking to them in the context of a particular forum or policy. So for example, through the EGU's Biodiversity Task Force, we had a meeting with MEPs at the European Parliament a few months ago, specifically about the nature restoration law. And at that meeting, we had speakers, and then we had a session afterwards in which we recommended amendments to the law. And when talking to policymakers, it was a very specific conversation that we were having. We know exactly what the law says. We've all read it, everyone who was at that meeting. We know exactly what problems there are with it, where the science is lacking, or where we see specific needs and where we can change the text. And we have exactly the amendments already written for the policymaker. And they just took that, copied and pasted it into the law. I shouldn't be saying that, but that's how it works in practicality. It's you in these situations should educate yourself so well that what they want from you is just to make their life easier. I mean, that's all anyone really wants, isn't it? They want you to provide them with exactly the information and service that they need for a very particular need that they have. In that case, they're going to love to have you.
We have a question over there, and then Nigel.
Right in here, actually. Yeah, this is me. Yeah. Hello, Seda Özdemir from Austrian Space Forum. Thanks for your talk. It's better that. So, thanks for your talk. It was very informative, actually. More needed, definitely. What I wanted to ask, I'm so new on this space policy making. On this, I'm the pure scientist nerd one. Yeah, but what I value is at most is the science communication, networking, as we are all in here, and what I see is this policy making is a very must-have in between of those two lines, and therefore I was thinking, like, considering recently to stepping into it, but it's scary, yeah, because it's basically social sciences, right? This is the thing that I'm running away since all my life. Yeah, I'm positive one, but still it's a must-have. Therefore, I would like to hear more from you. Just a simple question. You have a topic, I don't know, on something in space policy, so to say, and you need to discuss, you need to have your team probably working on it. What is the workload? How you stepping into it? How it begin? How it evolve? And probably, if it is ending in the law, this is something nice. But yeah, how do you work on it?
That's an excellent question. I'd say it strongly depends on which particular situation you're in. So for example, with this nature restoration law, we had put together the biodiversity task force that it's continuing. It was meeting for the last 2 years and continues to meet once a month for an hour meeting. So the workload for them, extremely low on average. This once a month meeting was good for keeping an eye out for specific policies and just discussing biodiversity as a topic. But when we saw an opportunity to provide input to the nature restoration law, I'd say that workload increased to maybe 5 hours a week for a month or two, as each of the team members provided their own expertise and particular fields of expertise to a document that we prepared that was sent to the MEPs. Then, and this is the more critical part, when the MEP assistants contacted us and said, we need your input on the amendments, that was a turnaround of, I had mentioned before, like a day or two. I think we were contacted on a Tuesday and asked to provide the answers by Thursday afternoon. I mean, it was really a quick turnaround, and I was working very late nights those couple days, but it was exactly what we wanted. So for those 2 days, I mean, I had no problem putting in a lot of hours. Other than that, the workload is relatively low, but it depends on exactly what it is you're doing, what activity it is you're doing. And I don't think any person in here, I couldn't give you an answer for how much a workload should be or would be for engaging in these activities, because it'll strongly depend on you, what you're comfortable doing, and what opportunities you find.
Control? Yeah, okay. By me on reporting, but for example, as an expert, so to say that I'm preparing a report for to get together as a policy, but it should be a way of writing, right? So it's not that I'm writing a paper or I'm writing an article, scientific article, but it should be a way of writing. So this is very important for, I believe, all of us how to do. Are there some, I don't know, courses, workshops on it that you plan to, yeah, because it's again another communication style that we really need to reach up. Yeah.
Yes, there are fantastic tools available through the EGU policy office. So if you just Google EGU policy, you'll find a big list of resources. I don't have anything to show up here, unfortunately. You can also message me or email me. I don't know if I could provide a link or something, maybe after this session. Okay. But at the very least, start out with EGU policy. There's a huge wealth of resources that are available, even job opportunities. As you asked, workshops and videos that you can watch right now that are free and available to anybody. There are sources out there, and that you can also take into account in the hours you put in too, because that skill building is part of it as well. But you're right in that these skills are so useful in so many different aspects of what scientists can and should do. Even in communicating among ourselves, being able to improve your level of communication is wonderful for scientific conferences and talks too. So I don't see it as wasted time. You might even get your supervisor to agree to it.
So we have a question by Nigel.
No, it's more a comment. Thank you very much for your input, and I think part of the plan today is to get people to realize that policy is important. Just from the planetary science side, I think just give two examples of where the scientific community can't ignore policy. First of all, planetary protection. The laws and the decisions made about planetary protection on the moon and what we do in Mars, even if you are the purest of pure scientists, what you can actually do will be legislated. And that legislation needs to be informed. And therefore, the science community has to help policymakers, to make good laws. That's exactly what you're saying. The other area, as we all think about space, is space debris, which is what we discussed in the European Parliament recently, with Ninas as one of the MEPs. That was one of the topics. Because again, people may think, oh well, it isn't relevant to me. It will be when you want to put a satellite in there to actually do any of your science for the next years. But even some of the science questions about that, the understanding of the effects of debris, the study of the damage of impacts and so on, that's a science problem. We've now got NATO and Space Command, and a lot of what they're going to be worried about is about debris too. But we look at impacts, we look at studies, we look at these things, we build the spacecraft. So the community needs to engage that, and because there will be, I exactly get your question. I have a friend who works in the House of Commons library. So he gets, the MP who says, oh, it's a debate tomorrow afternoon on science. Can you produce me a briefing paper on X? Before, because I want to say something and I want to make sure that I've got some facts. But then he says, well, yeah, I'm not an expert. I can't write on everything. So he has his list of contacts of people who say, I've got to write this briefing document for tomorrow. And that has to come from the engagement of the science community. So I think just for the people in the room, I think this is an important part. And I think the Europlanet voice, like EGU, I think is going to be important. And I think everybody's got to think that okay, you may not get involved in it in a huge way, but you have to be aware of it because it will influence what you're going to be able to do scientifically. And you want to be able to make sure that if legislation and so on is done, it's done in the right way.
Thank you for saying that, Nigel. I think that's an incredibly important point. And just as a quick comment about that, I heard a statistic a few weeks ago that Starlink network has multiplied the number of satellites by 5. It's just, don't quote me on that, please. It's an incredible, more. And I've heard that this is affecting the albedo. So for astronomers now, this is reducing the visibility, which again, you have to care as a scientist. You might not want to get involved in science policy, but you better care.
Yes, so we have a question from Geronimo.
Yes. Hi. So I'm actually representing industry here. We're part of Europlanet, and we're part of the industry team trying to foster interaction between scientists and academics. A question I have, a two-part question maybe. One is, we talk about scientists, but also as industry, can we have the same level of interaction with policymakers? I guess you reach to them, but obviously there is commercial interest, right? So how do we evaluate or balance this kind of input from companies? And then also a question is, like, we are part of Europlanet. We participate to the policy dinner, which we found very interesting, and also another session with the Friends of Europe on space traffic management. Was all very illuminating. So the question is, as Europlanet, scientists and industry together, can we make a better impact, more efficient impact to policymaker, or is individual is also okay, or it depends on the subject? Thank you.
Well, it depends on the subject is a good first part of that, but absolutely, industry contacts are so incredibly important in a lot of the science policy activities we do. When we do any kind of lobbying, and I say that word cautiously because we're not lobbying in a financial sense, but when we lobby politicians to talk about a particular law or to talk about a very important policy that we want to inform them of, industry contacts are a wonderful partner to have there. I think certainly working with Europlanet, your companies can have a stronger foundation and network together than working individually. Exactly. Yeah. SMEs also can have a voice by working together. I think it's much better than trying to work individually. Because you're a smaller organization, you don't have the power of large companies. This is finding scientists and science networks and societies that are willing to work with you on particular policies. I think everyone's stronger together.
No other questions or comments? Luca.
Okay, so practically speaking, I'm in independent researchers on a kind of soft money model, as I was saying, US. So my time is limited. If I want to engage, is there a way that, you know, we as like you representing your institution, and me as a scientist can interact so that my work is limited for the amount of time that I have, and you on your side, you put what I provide you with in a nice way to then link to the policymakers instead of me directly going to do the whole job of contacting policymaker and so on and so forth, which might take so much time for me, whereas you basically do it on a daily basis, you said. So you know how to do it, you know how to put the text that I give you in a right format and so on and so forth. So is there a way to interact so that my time is short and focused and you put the other part of the time?
How can we reduce your workload?
And collaborate, cooperate.
That's a fantastic question, and I'm sure many people here have the same question because, again, you have limited time. You have to worry about the next funding cycle. I completely understand. Join a network. Join an expert network. Register yourself as an expert in every opportunity you can, and then you will be part of a pool of resources that can be pulled from if a particular policy question comes up. That's, I'd say, the smallest step that you can make because the chances of you being directly asked are relatively low, but you'll still at least be there and have the potential to be. You could make a slightly bigger step and look for calls that are looking for particular experts. For example, when we put together this biodiversity task force, we looked for people specifically in biodiversity. If the next policy priority area of EGU is planetary policy, for example, then we would need to put together a task force of people like you who have that expertise in the different realms of planetary science. So if you would like to commit yourself to that level, that's another way you could do it. And again, you wouldn't be the one doing most of the work. It would just be when something comes up, you would provide exactly what your expertise is and answer particular questions. But it has to come from some kind of organization like Europlanet that has a policy remit that can provide that network platform to you so that you're not the one taking the burden of doing most of this work.
Yes, indeed. I think that's something that Europlanet and the Europlanet Society is willing to take as a role. And we have done that. We have been to the Parliament. I would say that as we are now, this is something which has to be kind of defined because you want to reduce your workload, but it means that our workload is increasing. So, and yeah, we are willing to do that because I think for Europlanet Society, this is a need, and we kind of represent the community, and we should take up this role. But you must understand that for the moment it's voluntary work too, and we do not have specific people working on that. So we could think about that, having somebody really responsible for such activities, but then comes again the problem of the funding. But that's something that certainly the Europlanet Society is willing to do in the coming years and has already done.
Just to comment on that, I'm so happy that Europlanet is putting this effort into policy because just to remind everyone here, you are powerful. You have the ability to influence policy, and that can change the future of our society, our planet. I mean, I don't mean to be dramatic, but it's true that as a collective society, you're stronger in your voice, and Europlanet can provide that link. So I'm very, very happy to see that the policy activities here are growing and building.
Yeah. As I said, we need some volunteering from the members too, because we need to find people who are willing to support, I would say, the baseline, the writing proposal, writing things, and we need people who are really connecting with the MEPs, and that's a lot of work, because as we heard, connecting with those MEPs is asking a lot of energy, and then suddenly everything is happening, and we have to be free for them. So it's so something to take into account. But Nigel?
Yeah, I think you said the right thing. I mean, I think it comes down to the whole discussion of this week, that if Europlanet is going to be successful in all these things, it will only happen if people believe that this is the community which they are part of, but they also have to serve.
Yeah.
And it doesn't require you doing huge amounts of work. If we increase the membership and every member plays a small role because they feel committed, we can do a lot more. MEPs are a good example. I could ask around the room, who is your MEP? I suspect that most people wouldn't know, right?
Yeah.
But it wouldn't take you very much time to look up who your MEP is. It will tell you on their webpage what committees they're on. It will tell you what votes they've committed on. They do want to talk to you. I mean, you do elect them. I mean, maybe not with a very high percentage of people actually go out and vote, but they are elected. And if everybody does that in the same way as everybody does one activity in a school or something as part of their kind of activities, then your outreach grows. But what we've got to get over this week is the fact that we said it so many times, it's your society. We can't do it for you because we don't have the time and we don't have the huge amount of people to do it. It will succeed if you do it, but there is a benefit. And as I say, I think, yeah, you know, the policy is important because it will influence what you do. And, you know, you can't turn around tomorrow and say, oh, God, I can't, you know, isn't it terrible that those scientists, you never stopped them making it impossible to put anything on the moon because of planetary protection? To which the answer will be, well, why didn't you take part in that debate? Yeah, I can't. Yeah, the thing about the satellites and so on. There are loads of petitions about dark skies. If you're an astronomer and you haven't signed a petition on a dark sky, shame on you, frankly, because you can't be an astronomer. You know, so sign the petition and make the case, and then talk to your member of parliament and say, you know, this is really a bad idea. You know, because they need to have that information. But I don't think it requires people doing lots of work. It just needs to be aware and to chip in when necessary. I think that's the point. For most people, you say your spectrum, I think is right. But for those people on the left-hand end, or whatever you want to call it, the far one side, there's a lot of stuff you can do with very small amounts. But that culminates in a lot if you get a lot of people doing it.
Now, thank you for saying that. There is actually a petition right now for the nature restoration law as well to prevent it from falling through and to have the parliament reevaluate the amendments that they've removed. So this petition for dark sky for your community should be incredibly important. And every single one of you has power and has a voice in this.
Anita?
I think I've just opened a poll in the session in the Hoover app for this, asking people whether they've engaged with policymakers or not, or whether they'd like to. So please do fill that in, because it would be really useful for us to have a knowledge of people that would be more interested, or who would be interested in pursuing this.
Regional hubs.
Yes, that's typically something that each regional hub could look after. Who's the MEPs and local interactions.
I also see that you added a comment in this session, Anita, that is for EGU policy as well. So thank you for putting that link in there. I didn't see the poll yet, but that's also going to be a really interesting thing to see.
Jean-David?
Okay, hello again. So I have another question. You mentioned outreach and public engagement. So what power as a public, how do you engage the public to influence policy? Is it something that is that we can consider? And if you have done so in the past, how did you do it?
Every bit of outreach that you do is a way of engaging with the public and influencing policy. It sounds dramatic again. I'm sorry to keep saying these kind of statements, but I truly feel that way. Just to give an example, in Brussels, I have an art piece in an expo right now. I helped coordinate the engagements between artists and scientists to bring to life their scientific research, most of whom were planetary scientists, actually, because of our institute, into artwork that is now on display at a gallery in Brussels for the public to visit and to learn about the science. So next to each artwork created by the artist, there is information about the science that inspired the artwork that was discussed between the scientist and artist. And people who wouldn't normally go to a science talk, for example, might go to this gallery expo instead, and they'll be exposed to and care about the science without hardly any effort from the scientists themselves. It's a form of outreach that is incredibly effective at reaching a community that wouldn't normally be reached. Something like this, I feel very strongly about and I'm very passionate about, because I do think these forms of engagement can be just as effective, if not more effective, as a method of science communication and science policy than some others that we've talked about here today. I know people who were personally inspired by this expo. For example, my artwork was talking about algal blooms and loss of biodiversity in the oceans. And there are people who went and were directly inspired by that and referenced it later in something else that they did. So you see this engagement happening actively and touching people on an emotional level. I really do believe that's a way to reach people and to influence how they vote and what actions that they take. I feel very strongly about any kind of outreach that you can do.
if
Thank
I
you very
may
much.
just follow that. Again, what I'm doing on my social profiles, I'm trying to educate the people about the subject which is happening in the society and which I believe is important. For example, if there will be something associated like with huge fires in Canada, I'm explaining from the scientific point of view, why is it happening? How is it linked to the global climate? And then I'm hoping that the people would try to make their representatives to do something with that. So you can be the one who is explaining the stuff from the scientific point of view, and then it's up to the public to do something with that, with the politicians.
Okay, Jean-David, maybe to answer, and then Ariana.
Sorry, so then do we need to tell how the public can get engaged, or because you say it's up to the public to then do what they want with it? So how can we guide them into doing something that is actually, sorry.
I'm doing this by two ways. Sometimes I'm just explaining the stuff and no action because I don't want to be too activistic. But sometimes I'm just putting the link, please sign this petition because of that and that and that, or please call this guy because of that and that. So it's up to you, up to the situation. Because of course, if you are too much activistic, that some people would like to interact with your content. So you would have a much higher reach if you are just explaining the stuff, but both ways are possible.
Ariana?
Yeah, just continuing on this example about outreach. So we are having the Soapbox Science event, and which is to promote women in the street and normally in public open space. And last year, there was the Minister of Education of Wallonie who was passing by, and then she contacted us like through the cabinet and the secretary, and this year she will pass by in a real official way. So you don't know who is your public, and you can have directly the politician in doing your outreach activities.
And that's a great point too, just to re-emphasize that do the kind of engagement and outreach that you feel comfortable with. If you are someone who enjoys social media, by all means use that. If you have the energy to post on Twitter, on Instagram, please do so. You never know who your audience is going to be. If that's not what you enjoy, I mean, do something that you actually do. If you want to get involved in art science collaborations in Brussels, talk to me. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can engage, but do what you're comfortable with. That's the really important thing. Do what you're passionate about, do what you enjoy, because your enjoyment will also inspire people. When they see the emotion and the passion that you have for your subject, that is incredibly inspirational too.
Okay. I would like to come back to maybe one of the questions that were asked, yeah, about the learning of skills. So I know there are a lot of things available on the EGU, but it's always more effective if you are just following a real in-person workshop. So I was wondering if this could be organized within the Europlanet, outside of the EPSC or during EPSC. That might be something that we could propose to organize, maybe through also the EPEC or webinars. Maybe we could have a series of webinars where we invite people already engaged in policy or science and policy. I don't know, Anita, if you see that working, I can maybe further discuss with Noel how to start this.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great idea, and I think we need to keep the visibility of this up. We need to. It's not enough just to have this session now and then expect everybody to kind of go away. I think hopefully we've got a bit of enthusiasm from people in the room, a bit of interest from people in the room, but we need to build on that, and we need to keep reminding people that it is an ongoing activity. We need to develop the skills. I mean, I think one of the really interesting things was for us, those of us that attended the dinner debate in the Parliament in in January was how difficult it was for any of us actually really to say anything, because the discussion was so, you know, it was part of the, it was on one of the days of the space conference. It was kind of following topics that had been talked about all day. You kind of got the sense that people kind of said the same things that they've been saying all day, and our bit of science wasn't really appropriate or relevant to any of that. And just even finding an opening to kind of dive into that, and Anne-Carine did very well, and Geronimo did very well, and Marcel in seizing an opportunity. But I think, you know, most of the rest of us kind of sat there and in slightly sort of rabbit in the headlights mechanism, in that it is unbelievably difficult just finding that opening that can then generate discussion. And, you know, people then that tried, maybe less successfully, you say something and then the conversation moves on. So it is a skill that needs to be developed, and it's you know, I'm a creative writer, and they talk about sort of writing being a muscle that needs to be flexed. Again, doing those kind of interventions is something that you need to keep doing and have practice at. So I think there's lots of things that we need to do, like having this kind of discussion, some training, but also maybe just sort of, you know, some almost some role playing on a regular basis, so that we feel comfortable, and that when maybe sometimes at short notice you kind of get dumped into those environments, people have the confidence and the skills to do that, because we don't have many people that can do that. We're incredibly lucky with Nigel, because Nigel always has something to say in every opportunity, and not or every circumstance always feels comfortable at saying something. But we can't rely on having Nigel there, or Geronimo, or Anne-Carine, or whatever. There needs to be a bigger pool of us that can do that.
And just to say, you're not alone. There's a society in the US called the Union of Concerned Scientists that provides these kind of training tools and resources online for free. They fly scientists out to these training sessions within the US, but you can use these same resources that they provide to create your own workshops and to provide that capacity to your own members. There exist the tools already for you. You just need to reach out and take them.
I'm just wondering, I mean, we talk about the big level going to the European Parliament and so on, but my gut feeling is that a lot of this can be started in your own local area. This is why we have the regional hubs. I mean, I talked to my MP. He happens to have, we have what we call surgeries in England, and he always holds his in the pub up the road. So it's an incredibly good place to have a chat. But I'm thinking, you know, if people want to get into it, just start there. You know, if you want to just talk to policymakers, well, just talk to the people like your local members or your and then your national societies and so on. So I think we've got the big telescope, you know, the helicopter view. Yeah, we've got to really got to get into the parliament and everything else. But I'm feeling there's a ground roots up as well. But it's just finding your MEP and talking to the people, because maybe, you know, that will be less imposing and you know, talking to them, because that is the person who's supposed to represent you. So I'll just task everybody to find their MEP, find out what committees they sit on. It's surprisingly how many of them actually, some of them do come from an academic background, not unfortunately normally a science background, but a social background. That means they do know what a university does, and they will sit on these committees.
Yeah, that's a really good point about local politics too. They say even just as a voter, your votes at a local level can have a more direct impact than at a national or international level. And many people overlook local elections and policy because it's not as interesting and exciting, but it's a great place to start.
So yeah, I was just going to say that just as a really basic thing that we can do very quickly is just put a really short how-to guide about how to find your MEP, because the European Parliament website is not always the most penetrable, and then makes suggestions about how to reach out to them in a way that you know will be effective. Because again, I think people are a bit nervous about how they might do that. So you know, just a very quick half-page post we can do fairly easily and quickly, and that should be an action coming out of this.
Pick the MEP, you need to talk to their assistant.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, the chances that you'll actually have a conversation with the MEP, even on the amendments that we worked on for the nature restoration law, it was entirely done with their group and their attendance. It wasn't them themselves, which is a bit frustrating, but that's how it works at that level.
I mean, one of the things that we found within Europlanet, and the only really way that we've been able to function, is that we have been lucky in over the years sort of finding an MEP who has been our friendly person, who is randomly willing to help us and look after us. And so we have been lucky over the years in that we have been able to find sort of a succession. I mean, it's never easy in that often, and then you have your person and they're wonderful, and then they get voted out or they lose their seat or there's Brexit or what have you. But having that point of contact that will talk to you is unbelievably important and helpful. And at least also kind of makes the whole experience a little bit less scary if you know that you've managed to speak to an MEP and they haven't bitten your head off.
Yeah, that's true. Luca?
I'll give you a personal experience. So I didn't talk to my MP, but once I went to a new received speech of the mayor of my town, and he gave a great speech talking about all the things that he did in Aix-les-Bains in France. Like a lot of things, put flowers, and organizing not astronomy but astrological workshops and stuff like that. Yeah, that's famous for that. Aix-les-Bains is famous for astrology. Astrology week. Well, anyway. So at the end, I approached him saying, "Yeah, it was a great speech. Really enjoyed all the stuff that you do in our town. There was only one thing that was missing." I said, "Oh, what is it? What's it?" And he said, "Well, you didn't talk about science at all." And he was really surprised. Yeah. Oh, you actually right. Now, he didn't promise to do more about science in our town, but maybe he picked up the remark. But the point I want to make when we're talking about workshops, surely it would be nice to have workshops for us to learn how to do, how to engage with policymakers. I think it would be interesting if Europlanet can also organize workshops for policymakers to understand us better. I'm giving an example like uncertainty, right? I mean, do policymakers really understand uncertainty? Maybe even scientists sometimes don't understand uncertainty, but that uncertainty is a big concept in climate science. Is a huge concept, but even in planetary science, right? So are we sure that when we talk about uncertainty, are we sure that we are talking about, we are understanding the same thing, Maybe they don't understand uncertainty as we do understand it. So having a workshop where we scientists, we can interact with them and explain to them, when we talk about uncertainty, we talk about these. And so that then a common vocabulary develops and maybe we have a better and clearer conversation.
So I don't know if, Noel, you had the chance to participate to such a workshop. I did. I think, Anita, you were there some months ago. It was organized by the Astronomy Society, International Astronomy Society. They organized a little workshop to explain things about astronomy. But the point is, if you want to get people from the parliament, it's not that easy. You need to have a contact inside who will be kind of hosting the workshop. So even if you organize everything for them, you come with a package ready to use, you still need to have somebody who will be the official host. And so that's not easy. So again, we need to understand how it works and to have always of entering the big machinery. If you just organize a workshop and send invitation, they will not come.
Because they are not interested in
They have no time.
They have no time.
The MEPs on average, they are in meetings from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day. They simply do not have the time. And that's why their assistants end up doing a lot of the actual physical work of writing laws and editing texts and attending workshops, because the MEPs themselves are stuck in meetings all the time.
So I've discussed with other people who are organizing things like that. They said that what's working is to organize breakfast. Yeah, because then you invite your MEPs. So still you have to find some MEPs in the place, but you have the breakfast. They are coming there for a limited time period, so 1 or 2 hours. They have something directly, food. And during that, you just explain with a background presentation the topics you wanted to address. And so for that they come. They just pass by, have a drink, listen to words and go by. That seems to attract at least some interest.
Food and wine.
Yeah. Okay, so we are almost reaching the end, but we have still some time for comments.
Has anyone else had a successful outreach or science policy interaction? I'd love to hear if anyone else has anything to discuss. Nigel, I know you have quite a bit, but
we don't have outreach people here. Okay, Jean-David?
I mean, so that's a pure outreach. I don't know if there have been any policy things behind it after that. But for example, this year, for the first time, Europlanet took part in the Fantasy Basel Sci-Fi Convention. This is like a very big event. 72,000 people come to this type of events. We estimate that on the NCCR Planet S and Europlanet joint stand, we had probably around 10,000 people that came around. So I think this is like a very big, it's really, I think the important thing there is like we really have to go to where the people are. And these kind of events look surprising, but in science fiction there is sci-fi, and we try to bring this science into that, and it's actually always been a great success. I've also done it with the Planet S crowd from Switzerland. And we have had like diversity of people coming to these kind of stands and events. For example, authors or video game developers working on Planet things who said we're very interested. You say, oh, this is how it works. Okay, that's I didn't know. And then of course the people, when you show them things like, okay, this is a meteorite, this is a piece of Mars, this is a piece of the moon, this is the oldest rock you will ever touch in the solar system. These are things that really mark people, I think. So that was, I think, like a very, very successful outreach event there. Whether it will have any big impact on policies, hopefully, but I haven't.
We need impact on the public too. So I think.
I was also once involved in the panel where we have our Prime Minister in the Czech Republic, and there were all the big heads from the nation grant agencies, and we were arguing with them that they have to somehow make the rules for young parents easier. And in the end, it was successful, and they just changed the rules. So now, if you have a kid, it's not really limiting your ability. So that was easy. It was organized by the Czech Academy of Sciences, which is my employer. So there had the connections to actually bring the real prime minister at the meeting for like 2 hours, and he had to interact with us about this issue. So that was worth it. But it's because the Czech Academy of Sciences is like a big entity, and it has the power actually to attract the politicians on site.
Yeah. Anita?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I mean, the other things that we've done within Europlanet sort of over the years, ESOF is usually an important part of our calendar. We try and have an event, we try and have a session there, but we also try and have a stand there every 2 years, because there's usually quite a lot of policymakers around, both from the Commission and MEPs as well. So that's one opportunity. But even conferences as well, there's often local politicians that come to EPSC. When we had EPSC in London, we had a session related to planetary science in the House of Commons. And so I think other meetings as well, there's often sort of local or national policymakers who come. Actually, when we had EPSE in Riga, we had the Minister of Finance was a space scientist, so she came and gave a talk about small satellites, which was really nice. So I think you know what Nigel was saying about the regional aspect being really important for us. It's always something that we should explore. And at meetings, not just our meetings, but also potentially sort of, you know, national meetings, try and make sure that we're there and use those opportunities whenever we can.
And that's also why it's important to have the local organizing committee of the EPSC very active. You wanted to...
So yeah, I guess I have a solid example for policymaking, which I just realized that it's a good example. Yeah, as I said, I'm from Austrian Space Forum, and we are an NGO, actually. We have a high outreach within Austria for sure, but also within Europe. So we are organizing some Mars analog missions every second, every third year. And we have a really high media outreach as well as the scientific one. But in Austria, the things are a little bit, in a political perspective, a little bit harsh. So as an NGO, we were not accepted by building ministerium, educational ministry as a research institute, and they show us, I guess it's a very nice one. The reasoning was like we were not aligned with the Prescott manual and some of part of it as a research institute. So my job was like about reading the Frascati manual like about a month. It's a harsh one to understand that with my planetologist and geologist mind and argue against those lines, which was really hard to clear it out, but we argued against. What is a very nice backup or support is a media power. So when you talk with media, when there is an article on, and if you go to the court with that, with all those hands, that end up very nice. Actually, we have been accredited as a research institute right now, and which is giving us an opportunity to giving lectures in universities, giving lectures in the high school level, in a scientific level, and accredit also those institutes on the way of science. And which I again realize right now, this is a policy making. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's it might be considered as an example, right? Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you, for those examples. I agree completely. I strongly believe that every single communication that you as a scientist make has a chance to change people's minds and impact society and policy, even if it's in a very tiny way. Every single communication is important. So I appreciate the outreach examples as well.
I just also want to say I did finally manage to get the poll to go live, so so that is there on the session in the Hoover, and also another question just asking about your experiences. How did you find it if you have engaged with policymakers? So do please, I think that should stay open. So just do please fill that in, because it would be really interesting to collect some of that information.
Nigel?
Yeah, just going back to the outreach. Obviously, Europlanet's produced an awful lot of outreach material. I remember the first time we were going around the European Commission, what we did was we looked up the MEPs we were going to see, and we see which of them had children of an appropriate age. And it was great when we could go in and hand them over a load of nice stickers and space material for the children. They were really, they started to see us in a different light then, you know, it's kind of, because they could go home that evening or whenever they were back home next and hand over this material. So it's those sort of things that you can look at. You know, stickers are great, right? You know, you want to, you know, we've got all this material that we can hand over and open doors with. So yeah, you know, check, and on their web pages it will tell you all this. So you know, if they've got an 8-year-old, take the stickers.
And it's not just for children. I mean, children
absolutely not. They like them too.
All ages. We're all just larger children who've been around for a bit longer. But honestly, it's another toy, and that's another excellent way to reach people.
Okay, I think we are at the end of the session, and I thank you all very much. It was interesting discussion. I hope some of you had some instigation to go a bit further and yeah, do some outreach and contact us if you want to be involved with MEPs. Yes, that's yeah. Okay, thank you very much for your attendance. It has been fruitful, I think. Okay, thank you.